You're listening to Fusion Patrol, a listener-supported podcast. Each week, we take a single episode of a science fiction TV series, movie, or audio and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Simon.
And tonight, a little bit behind everybody else in the world. But you know something? Based on everything I've heard so far, I'm sure we're going to be better at this. We are looking at the Dalek Master Plan. And the reason I think we're going to be better at this, and the reason it's taken us a little bit longer, is that every podcast I've heard so far has basically only talked about the two missing episodes that came back. They're no longer missing episodes, but they're all like, oh gosh, look at the new episodes. It's like, but you know, that's not us. We have to do the whole story. So we are doing all 12 parts of the Dalek Master Plan, even those that don't exist. And I guess we can talk about how we watched them, heard them, or whatever later on. But let's start with a synopsis, which is in 12 parts. So here we go. The Dalek Master Plan. Part 1, The Nightmare Begins. This episode was recovered in 2026. Stephen is very sick, poisoned on their last adventure. The doctor lands on the planet Kemble, a hostile jungle world, hoping to find medicine. Katerina, the doctor's new companion and 12th century BCE handmaiden, isn't much help, but she can stay in the TARDIS and keep an eye on Stephen while the doctor searches for help. Brett Vian of the Space Security Service is the last survivor of an Earth expedition to find the missing agent Mark Corey. Instead of finding Corey, they've discovered that the Daleks are on Kemble. But they've been unable to contact Earth to warn them, and they've all been picked off one by one, either by the Daleks or their Varga plants. Vian spies the doctor leaving the TARDIS and overpowers him, taking his key and entering the TARDIS. Stephen comes around long enough to overpower Vian, and the doctor secures him in a magnetic chair. The doctor leaves again to go to the city, unaware that it is a Dalek city. Mavic Jen, guardian of the solar system, is betraying Earth and has come to Kemble to join a coalition of aliens to team up with the Daleks for the conquest of the universe. The doctor has seen the Daleks and returns to the TARDIS. Meanwhile, Vian has offered Katerina some medicine that he claims might help cure Stephen. When the doctor returns to the TARDIS, it is surrounded by Daleks. Part 2, Day of Armageddon, which was recovered in 2004. The Daleks start Operation Inferno, burning the jungle to flush out the intruders. The doctor gets back to the TARDIS, and Stephen is feeling better. They leave the TARDIS with Vian. Vian wants to warn Earth, but the doctor wants to defeat the Daleks. They form an uneasy alliance and head to the city. Vian recognizes Mavic Jen and realizes he's a traitor. Mavic Jen has brought an incredibly rare material, Turanium, which is only found on Uranus, and took 50 years of mining to collect enough. It is needed for a Dalek weapon called the Time Destructor. The doctor infiltrates the council meeting and steals the Turanium, and they escape in Mavic Chen's ship. Part 3, Devil's Planet, recovered 2026. Aboard the ship, the doctor gives Vian a tape he found on the dead body of Mark Corey. It's a warning that the Daleks are planning to invade the solar system. They must get this evidence to Earth, but the Daleks have deflected their ship to the planet Desperus, an unguarded prison planet where the prisoners run free but have no means to leave. The prisoners see the forced landing of their ship and make to take it over, but the doctor rigs up a defense barrier while the others repair the ship. They escape before the Daleks can get there, but one of the prisoners has gotten on board and taken Katerina prisoner. Part 4 does not exist. The Traitors. Katerina and the prisoner are trapped in the airlock, and the doctor tries to bluff them that he'll open the outer door, but he cannot carry out the bluff, as Katerina will die. But Katerina does, expelling herself and the prisoner into space, killing them. Mavic Jen has returned to Earth to plant the idea that Brett Vian and the others are the traitors to Earth and must be apprehended. The head of the Space Security Service is also in on the plot and sets it all up. They put their most loyal, reliable agent, Sarah Kingdom, in charge of finding and killing the fugitives and recovering the Turanium core. Vian brings the ship to a secure facility on Earth to meet a contact, but the contact is working against them, and Vian kills him. They get separated, and Sarah catches up with Vian. At first, he seems relieved, and then she kills him. Part 5. This has been around since 1983. Counterplot. The Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah find their way into the middle of a cellular dissemination experiment and are accidentally teleported to the planet Myra, another jungle-like planet filled with invisible creatures called the Vizians. They've escaped Earth with the Terranium, but they have no way off the planet. Mavic Jen informs the Daleks where they were sent to, pretending it was his plan to get them away from Earth all along. They force Sarah to realize that Mavic Jen has betrayed Earth, and they learn the shocking truth. Brett Vian was her brother. The Daleks arrive and surround them. Part 6 doesn't exist. Coronas of the Sun. The Vizians attack the Daleks, and the Doctor and the others escape. They steal the Dalek ship and leave the planet. Mavic Jen returns to Kemble triumphantly, claiming that his plan worked perfectly, but the Daleks screwed it up. Aboard the Dalek ship, the Doctor creates a copy of the Terranium, but when Stephen tries to power it up using technology the Doctor tells him not to use, it works, but Stephen is trapped in a force field, unable to speak. The Daleks use a magnetic beam to return the ship to Kemble, but the Terranium is too valuable to risk destroying in a firefight, so the Doctor negotiates an exchange, getting them back to the TARDIS, with Stephen holding the fake Terranium. The Doctor and Sarah get in the TARDIS, while the Daleks try to kill Stephen. The force field protects him just long enough to get into the TARDIS and leave. They have escaped with the Terranium, and the Daleks have the fake. Part 7. The Feast of Stephen. The TARDIS scanner is broken and materializes on December 25, 1966, in front of an English police station. The police are mystified at the arrival of a police box on their door, and they soon take the Doctor in for questioning. Stephen pretends to be a police officer and tries to get the Doctor out of the station, while Sarah attempts to fix the scanner. Soon, she is run off by the police, and then they all get back in the TARDIS and disappear. They arrive at a movie set in the 1920s, and hijinks ensue as the time travelers confuse and are confused by the goings-on at a silent movie studio before they escape once more in the TARDIS. At one point, it was Christmas, and so the Doctor offers up a toast. Part 8, Volcano, does not exist. By the way, the Feast of Stephen does not exist as well. The Time Destructor is ready for testing, and Mavic Jen is discussing the fugitives with the Daleks. They know that one of them is the Doctor, a time traveler. Aboard the TARDIS, Sarah wants to return to Kemble and destroy the Daleks, and she does not yet understand that the TARDIS never goes where it's told. They detect something following them on the space-time curve and assume it to be the Daleks. On Kemble, the Daleks discover that the core is a fake, and they call for a time machine to pursue the Doctor. The TARDIS lands on the pitch at Lord's during the Boxing Day test and briefly helps contribute to England's inevitable loss to the Aussies. They take off again, hoping they've shaken their pursuers, but they have not. They land on a newly forming planet, spewing lava, and wait for their pursuer. It is the meddling monk, and to get revenge on the Doctor for their last encounter, he damages the TARDIS lock and leaves them stranded. But the Doctor quickly busts open the lock, and they take off again, landing next in 1966 London, in time for New Year's Eve celebrations. Part 9 doesn't exist. Golden Death. The TARDIS's next stop is ancient Egypt during the construction of the pyramids. They've once again detected that they are pursued through time, but think it is the monk. It is not. The Daleks are on their trail. The Doctor must repair the lock, so while he works on it, Stephen keeps an eye out for the monk's arrival. When he sees the ship arrive, he assumes it's the monk's TARDIS. He and Sarah go to intercept the monk, but they are captured by the Egyptians, who are in turn mostly killed by the Daleks. The monk arrives in his TARDIS, having jumped a time track to avoid detection, but it is for naught, as the Doctor sees his TARDIS arrive and realizes the other ship must be the Daleks. The Doctor follows the monk. The monk is captured by the Daleks and Mavic Jen, who came along on the expedition. Chen gives him the chance to betray the Doctor and retrieve the Terranium core. He agrees. Meanwhile, the Doctor enters the monk's unlocked TARDIS and changes it into a police box, then returns to following the monk. The monk finds the Doctor's TARDIS, which has been moved into a tomb, and the Doctor confronts him and threatens to do him harm. Stephen and Sarah have escaped the Egyptians, find the TARDIS, and see a mummy coming out of a sarcophagus. The end. Part 10. This exists, recovered in 1983, escape switch. The mummy turns out to be the monk, trussed up by the Doctor, but the Doctor is missing. The uneasy trio go looking for the Doctor, but at the first opportunity, the monk tries to escape. They are all captured by the Daleks, and the monk tries to pretend that it was his plan to bring them hostages. The Daleks broadcast an ultimatum to the Doctor: bring the Terranium or his friends will die. Left with no choice, but still with the risk of damaging the Terranium as a threat, the Doctor negotiates a handoff. The handoff is happening when more Egyptians attack. In the confusion, everyone escapes, but Mavic Jen has the Terranium. The Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah escape into the TARDIS, as narrowly does the monk in his TARDIS, now in the form of a police box. The Doctor had changed the shape to confuse the Daleks, but he has also stolen the direction unit from the monk's TARDIS. Because the monk's TARDIS is newer, it might blow up the TARDIS, but they have no choice. They must stop the Daleks, and to do that, they must return to Kemble. And the very real possibility they will die when they set course. There is an explosion. Part 11, The Abandoned Planet, doesn't exist. Mavic Jen and the Dalek Time Machine have returned to Kemble with the core, and the Time Destructor is being prepared. The Daleks now have no further use for Mavic Jen or the Council, but they use him to take control of the Council, then lock them all up. The TARDIS has arrived on Kemble, but the directional unit has been destroyed. The Doctor goes outside and disappears. Sarah and Stephen decide to go to the Dalek city to find him. They find an empty building, and eventually the imprisoned council delegates, including Mavic Jen. Reluctantly, they release them with their promise to return home and muster a force to fight the Daleks. They all leave, but Chen's ship blows up during takeoff. They spy a Dalek and follow it to an underground base, but they are captured by Mavic Jen, who faked his own death. Part 12 does not exist. Destruction of Time. Chen is now quite insane and convinced that Stephen and Sarah know where the Doctor is and that the Doctor is doing a deal with the Daleks for ultimate power. They cannot convince him otherwise, but he is determined to take them to the Daleks to show how important he is. That goes about as well as you'd expect, with Chen fleeing the control room with Daleks hot on his tail. He doesn't last long. In the confusion, the Doctor reappears and activates the Time Destructor, using it to get out of the control room with his companions. They have orders to run to the TARDIS immediately. Sarah disobeys and returns to help the Doctor. He explains that the Time Destructor is on, but at a very low level, and it will not stop until the Terranium is used up. If Sarah feels weird, she needs to tell him. They almost make it to the TARDIS before they collapse. Stephen, inside the TARDIS, goes outside, tries to turn off the Time Destructor, but is unable. However, he has put it into reverse, and the Doctor starts to come around. Sarah, however, is dead. They get back into the TARDIS in time for the Daleks to arrive, but they are soon destroyed, as is the planet Kemble, by the Time Destructor, which finally runs out of Terranium. The Doctor and Stephen contemplate the destruction of all the Daleks on Kemble at the cost of the lives of their friends, Katerina, Brett Vian, and Sarah Kingdom. All right. The Dalek Master Plan, Season 3. Long lost, long sought after story. What do you think overall?
Overall, I found it surprisingly interesting. We say we have to do the whole story because, that's what we do on Fusion Patrol, and it's part of the thing of the podcast. We always, when it comes to Doctor Who, we treat the whole story as the whole story. We don't break it down into bits of it. But I think it's also true that both you and I tend to like to watch these things as a whole, and it's led to us avoiding the incomplete serials until, for example, they get animated, and then we can actually watch the whole thing and look at the whole thing as a story. And I can't quite remember what the pretext was for us saying, well, we'll do this one, despite the fact that it hasn't been animated, apart from the fact that, good God, it's new Doctor Who for the first time in 13 years.
It's the first recovery since the podcast started, I believe.
Well, there we go. So...
and everyone in the world is doing it. I mean, I had people ask me immediately when it came out, are you guys going to be doing it? Okay, yeah.
It leapt into my mind, and it having been 13 years, I couldn't quite remember what we did last time. So, there wouldn't have been a last time, although I seem to remember us discussing I think
we did the Web of
one that was Fear. Yeah, and the one that was recovered with it.
Enemy of the World.
Enemy of the world. Anyway, a little delve in the archives. I shall find out whether we did or not. But the point is that certainly for me, I don't even want to know any of the details about a story unless I'm actually going to watch it, which means kind of it is difficult with Doctor Who, because for some of these stories you think, well, what are the chances of this thing actually ever being, never mind the stories, the episodes being discovered, but just there being enough money and willpower to put together an animation of it that we could watch and discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So this one has always struck me from what I knew of it, and I'll sort of get into some of the reasons why I think fans are particularly interested in this story, but from what I knew of it, as being a bit like a sequel to The Chase, right? You've got a story that is nominally a Dalek story, but where it's actually a lot more like just a bunch of subplots or standalone plots that are strung together.
Keys of Marinus comes to mind.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's not really a Dalek thing, is it? But it's certainly something that they did in The Chase, and then this is 12 episodes long, and so my kind of assumption with it was that it would be like The Chase but twice as long. And kind of the corollary to that is that I didn't much like The Chase. It didn't
Fair enough.
particularly float my boat. It was that amongst all of the Dalek stories, to put these into context, the first Dalek story is the first Dalek story. It's and actually I do think it is very good, having rewatched it a number of times, but it is also just of interest because it is the first Dalek story. The second Dalek story, Dalek Invasion of Earth, is brilliant. So The Chase is a kind of disappointing sequel, and certainly as you go on then it feels like I'm being broad in my generalizations here, but until you get to Genesis of the Daleks, pretty much Terry Nation has written his Dalek story again.
Yes.
And so this was surprising to me in this, apart from some of the surprises within the actual story or in the events within the story and consequently Doctor Who lore. This was surprising to me in that I actually found it much more engaging. I wouldn't say it was kind of Dalek Invasion of Earth quality, but it puts the Daleks back into a position of being a much more interesting, threatening force. And when some of the kind of Dalek aficionados, including some of those involved in making Doctor Who these days, talk about how great the Daleks were in the 1960s, I can kind of see what they're getting at in this story, because there is a sense in which telling the story from the point of view of much more of the people who are conspiring with the Daleks because they fear them and are threatened by the Daleks is more interesting than just the stories about the Daleks themselves.
Well, so to add on to that, I went back and double checked. The Target novelization of this was not released until like 1989, which is after a point where I thought I had all that they were ever going to release. And so I don't have any newer than that. I know that Target kind of came back and started doing new series stuff and picking up some of the things. And I guess they were just still doing a few even back in the day. So I have never read this. I do not watch the missing episodes. Therefore, I have never seen this. I have never read a plot synopsis of this story. I know that it is a Dalek story. This features the Time Destructor, and most infamously, it features the death of companions Katarina and Sarah Kingdom. And it is also the story where people are like, I don't know, does Sarah Kingdom count as a companion? Right? So I think we should say, and I think I know but I'll go first. How you watched or consumed the
Yes.
missing episodes. I sought out fan reconstructions online. I watched, I would say, reconstructions from 3, possibly 4 different places to carry on. And I have once or twice listened to an audio here and there of a missing episode, with the narration and whatnot. And and I like audio dramas, but they don't grab me. I'll happily read the books if I had them, but I just don't care for the audio things. And so that's why I went after the animated ones. Let me say one of them, well, the majority of the ones I watched, and you just have to kind of hunt them down on YouTube, is basically what I had to do, were basically kind of photographs of the characters that had been cut into characters and then sort of Terry Gilliam almost animated.
Oh, wow.
And occasionally moved a little bit here and there, or just kind of shuffled across. Very much like Terry Gilliam. In fact, it's like not quite stop animation, but the cutout of the Doctor moves along the set, and he's like, okay, yeah, all right, and those are fine. I had absolutely no problem watching those. Those are low level animation, and they worked for me. That was like, okay, this is fine. I'm not having a real problem with that.
Sorry, I'm curious in this. How many of the episodes did you get animations for, or did you find they'd all got animations?
I found animations for all of them.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, from different groups. The Feast of Stephen, the animation was horrible. Sorry, guys. I appreciate the effort, but it was that troll face meme that shows up in memes all over the internet. That's what they looked like. It was enough to convey what was going on in the story. However, I have learned that they took some liberties. They took liberties with the animation. Can't believe a fan reconstruction did this. Where they would insert title cards as if it was a 1920s silent film.
One of the things about this serial in particular, I mean, I guess we'll come on to talk about the prospects of it being properly animated, but it's interesting that there are not photo snaps for entire episodes of this.
Yeah.
So there are telesnaps available for a lot of the missing episodes, and the recons that we have discussed when we've picked up the previous DVD releases have been made with telesnaps. Because with this, when the missing episodes were recovered, the missing episodes were added to iPlayer, but nothing else was there. There are no official reconstructions, and there are no telesnaps, and I don't even know how much existing paperwork there is for some of this, in terms of what stage scripts have survived. Obviously, we do have the audio, which is how you've been able to how these reconstructions have been made, and the audio does exist for all the episodes. But yeah, it's curious when you do get these reconstructions to think how people have figured out what it looked like. I guess there may be some, word of mouth from people who actually remember seeing it at the time, maybe even some people who were involved in making it. But given how much happens in these episodes, how much changes from episode to episode, including changes in setting, there are entire sets that I don't know what the evidence is for the kind of visual appearance of them. So there must have been a lot of that kind of creative decision making and a lot of coming up with things from absolutely nothing in the reconstructions that you've watched.
I think in many cases, the reconstructions I watched, in many instances, they have there is a Dalek control room. We do know what it looks like. And so then they based all the other Dalek locations on that so that it has a consistent feel. Anyway, but I should say the final one that I watched, part 12, was done with action figures, and I don't know what action figures they had. They had a William Hartnell. If they had a Steven action figure, it's a terrible action figure. Looks nothing like him. The Mavic Jen looks nothing like Mavic Jen. Sarah Kingdom. Whoever done it had, I think, painted the action figures or changed them around so that they were at least wearing the right clothes. And then, stop motion animated them around. That was the least satisfying of the bunch, which is, a shame because it's the last episode in the climax. I'm half tempted to try to find the people that did the other ones and see if I can find ones for the thing. Anyway, you listen to the official audios, is that right?
Well, as in, yes, the BBC released audios. In fact, I discovered that after I'd bought copies of them, I discovered that they'd broadcast them on Radio 7 at some point, and I'd recorded them from that as well. But they're available commercially and they're pretty reasonably priced, and they are the soundtracks, the complete soundtrack. So, I watched the episodes that exist, but you could listen to the whole thing with Peter Purvis doing a description, essentially, a narration that has been a feature on some of the recons where there is too much action going on, and the stills only tell so much of the story. So there's a bit of narration to essentially describe any action that is going on, and also to take you into a scene as you move from scene to scene. I've listened to entire serials. My first experience of the 10th Planet, my first experience of Power of the Daleks was through listening to these these narrated soundtrack versions. And I'm kind of I when we were discussing this, and we sort of said, well, we'll do our own thing, but I did take a look at a recon for an episode that I found online that I think was done with Lego.
I saw one of those.
I found about 3, but the one with Lego actually drew me in for 4 or 5 minutes of watching it. But that's the quality of the kind of imaginative reconstruction varied quite a lot. And while I think we have found that is also true of the official releases.
Yep.
I'm much more kind of prepared to put my time into watching an animated version that has a certain amount of, I don't know, creative quality control behind it, shall we say. I do, however, kind of despite the fact that was my preferred option was listening to the audios, I do totally get where you're coming from, that listening to the audios is a somewhat unsatisfying experience. And I think this is partly the case the more audios there are missing. So the Dalek Master Plan was a much better experience for there being almost half of it extant now. And
yes.
So, wonderful to have these episodes back. But it's something that I have thought about quite a lot as I've been listening to these, because as you do, I also really like audio drama, Doctor Who audio drama in particular. I listened to a huge proportion of the Big Finish output and various other, the John Pertwee dramas back on Radio 2 in the day. And so I'm sort of, I'm aware that these suffer for the fact that it's not that they are audio, it's that they are the soundtrack to something that was never intended to be listened to without the accompanying visuals. And it has led me to think that there's a missed trick here in terms of, particularly given, a story like this where there is so little data on the visuals and so many challenges in terms of the numbers of characters and numbers of sets and the length of it, I guess, in terms of there being an animated reconstruction, that I'm not expecting it to be anywhere near the top of the current list, even if there is a current list, and I sincerely hope there is. And I think we need a Tales from the TARDIS that is on audio, because that format could so easily be adapted. And you could have, you could have Peter Purvis who does the narration on these, but not in character as Stephen. But you could have him in character as Stephen, talking someone through his recollections of this serial, or indeed any incarnation of the Doctor talking through his recollections of the serial to a new companion who doesn't know any of the setting, which would in part have the advantage of letting you set it up so that you get a bit of background as to why Stephen is ill at the beginning of the story and who the hell Katerina is. But it would also let you cut an awful lot of it out where it is just not a satisfying experience on audio, and you just replace that with sufficient narration to take you across the story, surround it with some, present day character work. And I think you could produce something that was actually a much more satisfying way of experiencing the story if you are going to experience it on audio.
I would think, yeah, you're right. You're right. Lots of characters, lots of different settings, although most of them are just a jungle planet. Just give it a different name. And
yeah.
But there's a buzz right now about the Dalek Master Plan. And buzz translates to sales, and sales translates to interest. And so, if ever there was a time for them to try to tackle a complex story, it's now.
I would obviously much prefer there to be an animated version of this, and I have my own kind of gut feeling about how likely this is, and I don't want to puncture your optimism on that. But nevertheless, I think that you can have multiple ways to experience these stories, because the fact is, only if we discover the original episodes will we experience what was intended through this story. We've discussed the fact that the animations themselves make a whole bunch of new sets of artistic decisions. And that's not just in terms of the kind of missing visual elements. It's things like the little cut around the rough and tumble machine that we discussed in the Macro Terror. And if you did a kind of Tales from the TARDIS thing where you were basically doing a really heavy edit on it, that would obviously also involve a lot of decisions about what you edited out. But the fact is, even a kind of fairly neutral and narration of the missing action in these stories is still an alternative creative interpretation of what's going on, because the way in which the action is described is actually never neutral. And there's always some kind of addition or interpretation of people's inner thoughts. So there's a difference, I think, between saying Sarah looks around wide-eyed at the sarcophagus and Sarah looks around wide-eyed with fear at the sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's even a moment where the narration describes colours, which I thought was quite funny, given that the serial is black and white. And, it might not stay black and white if it was animated, because as we've seen, most of the modern serials get coloured in. But
what colour did they describe?
It is all creative. It was in describing the distinction between the Supreme Dalek and the other Daleks. The Supreme Dalek is black. You say, well, that's fair enough. It's monochrome. That carries over. And as distinct from the other Daleks, which are gunmetal and blue.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, how was anyone supposed to know they were blue before John Pertwee turned up?
I do want to add one thing with regards to, listening to the audio. I think, if you take Big Finish as an example. Those are stories that are crafted to be audio, and some are more successful than others, but that is the intended goal. And yet when you make a TV show, as you said, you're making this for a visual medium. I want to add that there's another complication with this particular story, and that is director Douglas Camfield, who is, I would guess, the most ambitious director they've ever had in classic Doctor Who, at least in the black and white era. He's great. He's very visual. He's very visual. So he is telling the story with, there's a scene, a lot of people have mentioned it. This is not my original thought, but there's the scene when the Daleks are going to kill the spongiform, the leafy delegate, and Mavic Jen is just kind of lounging around on one side of the set. He's casually moving out of the way, and then he's just he's relaxed, and you would never get that from the audio. But that is a lot of character development there in just what he's doing on the set.
Well, and yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you'll ever recreate it. I think what you could do, if you wanted to make a better audio version of it, would be to get an audio writer, get one of the brilliant scribes from the Big Finish stable, and give them the script of the entire kind of 5-hour epic, but ask them to put together a 2 or 3 hour story with some kind of framing around it, and just use the original soundtrack as a resource whenever there is something that they think can fit in, because you're never gonna recreate those moments.
Oh,
and
I was thinking,
I agree.
In turn, I was thinking that we didn't even know that moment existed.
Well, right, yeah, exactly.
Because that could be just Douglas Camfield said, "Hey, here's what I'm feeling.
Yeah,
block it out this way," and then we don't.
It's a different story, and in a way, there's the bit of me that would always have said, don't bother to put that creative energy into this. Just go ahead and create something that is completely brand new, that is written from scratch for audio, and which is genuinely someone else's own original creative idea. And the bit of me that kind of says, but I want some version of this story, is because it does fill in a part of the story. It does have these significant moments in it, the death of the first 2 companion deaths, and it's also the basis for a lot of sequels. A lot of the kind of feel of this was somewhat familiar to me, because, and if you haven't listened, if you're very allergic to spoilers and you haven't listened to all of the Big Finish audios, there is a spoiler in which story, it turns out, is a sequel to the Dalek's Master Plan. But there is I think it's series 8 of the 4th Doctor Adventures is basically, quite.
Oh yeah. Okay, I've heard that one. Yeah. I remember it now.
It's an entertaining story in its own right, but it draws quite heavily on this, and I was quite conscious at the time of first listening to that, and I'm now looking forward to going back and listening to it again. I was conscious at the first time of listening to that I hadn't really got a handle on what they were building on. And now, having experienced the original serial, I think that will change my interpretation of some of that. And so it's things like that where I think, there are reasons why you want to experience these stories. And I do appreciate being able to experience them in different ways, particularly if we cannot experience the originals. And that's because Doctor Who is a text that is so deeply studied and on which there are so many kind of creative riffs. We have that for stories that do exist. There are audio releases of stories that do exist with the narration. There are novelizations of the stories that exist. So there are alternative ways of experiencing these. So if they did make an audio of this, And then, as soon as, let's hope, next year, they then also did an animation of it. I wouldn't necessarily think it was a bad thing to have both versions as options.
Okay, here's my prediction, and then we'll move on to maybe some background on the story and whatnot. Here's my prediction. Christmas 2026, RTD, having had a completely bankrupt lack of ideas about what to do for his Christmas special, and then the recovery of these episodes has captured a brilliant idea. They're going to do computer-generated, lifelike, AI-generated Doctor Who Hartnell characters. They're going to make a Tales of the TARDIS version of this story, and they're going to fill it in using the CGI to, kind of make a short version of it. And then the entire Christmas special will be a direct but completely stupid sequel to the Dalek Master
To the Feast
Plan.
of Stephen.
Yeah, perhaps. I was like, do you remember that time we were at the movie studio? And oh my gosh, who knew that the aliens were there? And yeah, okay. So I will say, I don't think I said this. Overall, I enjoyed this. I found it engaging. I definitely at times was like, oh yeah, there's Terry Nation for you. Like, oh yeah, we're hopping from one to another, to another, to another. Okay, yeah, okay. I did find that it trailed off. My interest did begin waning as the story got to the end, as Mavic Jen got madder and madder and madder, and I mean that in the insane sense. He was a really engagingly interesting villain at the beginning. But as it became clear that he was drifting further and further from any form of reality, he became less interesting, as all completely mad villains are.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
So that's kind of how I feel that the story traveled. But I did enjoy it, and there's a couple things that I want to bring out. So this story was commissioned under Verity Lambert. And John Wiles, probably, took over with the Mythmakers, so just the story prior to this. He hated this. He did not like this story at all, and he particularly hated the fact that they had commissioned Terry Nation to write a 6-part story. And then the BBC said, now we want to stretch this out over Christmas, so we're going to expand it to 12 episodes. And Terry Nation had gone off to be the script editor at the Baron, and he just simply couldn't do it. That's why Dennis Spooner wrote half of these stories based on an idea from Terry Nation. So it's a lot of filler by design, just so that they could market Dalek toys over Christmas. It's kind of
it's actually something of a tradition, because I've been looking at obviously you've got the fact that the Feast of Stephen is the first Doctor Who Christmas special. Like, you talk about 2026 and having a Christmas special on Christmas Day, but this was the first time we had a Doctor Who on Christmas Day. But it's only because Doctor Who ran the whole year round, more or less. Over the Christmas period in the previous 2 years, it was also Dalek stories. So for all of Doctor Who up to this point, over Christmas, they had Dalek stories.
But it
feels like a slightly odd coincidence.
You've got to figure in 63. Yeah, okay, it was in November or December, but they had no clue. So it's not a deliberate effort to have the Daleks.
It wasn't. I mean, that was the original Dalek story. It just happened. It happened to run over Christmas, and then Dalek Invasion of Earth, which was the sequel a year later, happened to run over Christmas. It must have taken them a while to work out the Daleks were popular, and that's all there is to it. I'm sure, but it just. I hadn't realised it until that point, and then suddenly felt like, oh gosh, is it this? This is almost like a tradition that they are now upholding, that the Christmas period must have Daleks to go along with Santa and the fairy on top of the tree.
So Wiles and Hartnell did not get along, which is why Wiles only lasted through to the arc. He did not like this story, did not like the length of the story. He wanted to darken up Doctor Who, make it more adult. The BBC, nope. Billy Hartnell, nope. None of them wanted that. So they were at odds from the very beginning. There were lots of problems with Hartnell and his health and his attitude, which is why he's not in episode 11 at all. It's not his health. Wiles wrote him out so they wouldn't have to have him on screen as much.
That's not that uncommon, though, is it? That I'm sure we've discussed other serials where it's basically, well, I mean, even recently when we're talking about the Celestial Toymaker.
Well, that's Wiles again. That's right. Wiles too, trying to get rid of him. So I mean, he wrote him out not because he was sick. He wrote him out because he didn't want to have to deal with him. It's like, we're just going to minimize him in this story because there'd been some blow up with a makeup person or something, and it was just it's like they just kind of wrote stuff gave it to Stephen and sent it along the way.
There's a couple of things in terms of how that presents within the story. There's one thing is the kind of tonal consistency of this story, and I'm sure we'll sort of come back to the deaths, but there are dramatic moments, and we haven't had them before. So the idea of it darkening up, I can see that in this. At the same time, you've also got Dennis Spooner writing it, and the monk coming back, and so there are, and I sort of feel that. I mean, it probably is because Spooner writes more of the second half that it becomes a more kind of rompy comedic story, and it wasn't necessarily that I didn't like that, but I did start to feel like my brain was having to shift gear because I had been expecting something slightly different, given, by where you get to within the traitors, it all feels like it's going somewhere very dark, and you're on a certain trajectory, the more kind of Terry Nation trajectory, and then it does kind of turn round. It feels like, and I wonder if that is because there are different creative forces disagreeing behind the scenes about what should be happening.
I think,
and then that's kind of playing out.
Katerina is an example.
Well, I mean, I have thought about it. We'll come back to the companion death. Just the other thing, just on that point about the issues with Hartnell and the tensions there, is that I think that I mean, we've talked about this before, that I'm not a massive fan of William Hartnell as Doctor Who. I like him as an actor, but as Doctor Who, I often find him a bit kind of one note. I do feel like he's struggling a bit or phoning it in. A lot of the performances in this, particularly the ones that we got to see in the surviving episodes, I thought were really good. I was impressed.
I thought when watching the first episode, so this is a recovered one, just recovered. Nobody's seen it apart from a few lucky people in the process. And I'm watching this and I'm going, Hartnell is really fun and good in this. This is Hartnell hitting his stride. This is the stuff we, I guess, haven't seen. I was really impressed by it. I mean, that first episode was just really, really good, even though not a whole lot happens in it, as with many of the others, but it sets it up really well. And I'm like, no, this is great. Although I, as with other people, my immediate reaction is, ooh, Katerina's got to go. If I had, she's just got to go. She's completely and absolutely as useless as Jamie really should have been, but wasn't, I can see how people are a lot more fond of him. He's not my top 5. He's He's never been in my top 5. Well, when there were 5, I guess he was. But
yeah, I kind of put him somewhere in my top 14, I think.
Episode 1, wow. Episode 3, ignore. 2's been around for a while. Not that I'd seen it, but episode 3, like, boy, if this had been the one they'd recovered, as opposed to episode 2 or episode 1, I'd have been less impressed by this find. I mean, that's Devil's Planet. Devil's Planet is
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. But some of the audio performances were very, very good. I also think, on that interesting question of which episodes people want to see recovered, the one that everyone wanted to have recovered, or one of the ones, was episode 4.
4, yeah.
Yeah,
I want to see Katerina die.
Well, that's kind of seen as being the significance of it, but it is a dramatic episode. I think it's. I entirely take your point about Katerina and why she gets written out so quickly, because she's only been introduced in the Mythmakers, right?
Yep.
So she's scarcely a companion for any time. She's absolutely dreadful. By contrast to Sarah Kingdom, who I kind of has more of a reputation, partly that sort of cast thing, but who I thought was an absolutely terrific companion. I was very annoyed that she died at the end of this episode, and I would argue she is more of a proper companion than Katerina is.
I would agree with that, but my main complaint about Sarah Kingdom is that shift from episode 4 to episode 5. I mean, she goes from
too fast
enemy to okay, yeah, I'm one of the gang, very quickly.
Yeah, and the reason that I'd sort of seen that I'd assumed people argued so hard that she didn't count as a proper companion was because there was some sort of moral ambiguity about her character, that because she kills Flion, who is a sort of proto-companion himself. But actually, as you say, that lasts for one episode, and then bam, we're straight into. And this is I think the kind of curse of pretty much all of classic Who, is that companions get a strong introduction, which is supposed to define them and make them distinctive, and then they get to play the generic companion throughout. And even in view of that, I feel like the way in which Kingdom is written to have a certain kind of skepticism of the Doctor, certainly an independence and some kick-ass fighting skills, made her much more interesting than a lot of other companions who were around for a lot longer before or after her. So I thought that was a bit of a shame. But what I did think about Katerina's death, even though it was kind of almost welcome just because Katerina herself was so dreadful, was that it had a real it had a powerful impact, I felt. It was unexpected. It wasn't even at the end of an episode. And when everyone kind of goes on about Adric's death, Adric's selfless sacrifice, but the way in which that is amped up, and then you have the kind of silent credits or whatever, it did not feel as effective to me, even though I had to experience this one without seeing any of it. I was just listening on audio. Mm-hmm. I just thought this was unbelievably unexpected and impactful. And I would love to see this episode. I would really love it. I would love them to properly recover it.
Yeah, I agree. And you could argue that Adric was not intentionally self-sacrificing. He was hoping to save the day and failed. Sorry, Adric.
He was, and you
did save the day, but you failed in the argument. Katerina,
you could argue there's some ambiguity over what Katerina did, partly because we can't actually see all of it. But yeah, it definitely looks like, or sounds like, well, they certainly choose to believe, and it fits with her character that she was making that sacrifice. in as far as she understood what she was doing.
Yeah. Katerina, by the way, originally was not Brett Vian's sister.
Sarah,
did I say? I said Katerina.
you said Katerina.
Sarah. Yeah, no. Katerina was not written as his sister either. Okay.
Well, yes,
I think
that's
come
true,
on, that's
but not
pretty
necessarily
obvious.
as surprising.
I can't believe you're arguing with me here on this.
Yes, okay, fair enough. I'll stop arguing about that.
Sarah was his lover.
Oh.
In Terry Nation's original.
Do you know, my immediate reaction to that is that would have been better. It would certainly have been more Terry Nation, yeah.
It also would have made a whole lot more sense. I mean, first off, their character names are different, and I know that's not a indicator or whatnot, but I mean, it's like, it does make you feel like they weren't trying to do that from the word go.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like, oh, Terry Nation's not here, Dennis Spooner's here today, all right, let's make her his sister. Okay. But, he has that scene, and he's like, oh, he recognizes her. He brightens up when he sees her, and then she kills him, and which would be much more impactful. I mean, it's pretty impactful if you're killing your brother, but the fact that we don't know that anyway kind of loses a bit of drama either way. And then next week, oh yeah, by the way, he's my brother, and boo-hoo, and now I'm on your side. It just doesn't. Yeah, and odd choice. Let's see. I'm just going to point out a couple of typical Terry Nation nonsense. Everybody knows it, but Terry Nation's really bad at coming up with names.
He's excellent at coming up with names.
The planet Desperus, where all the desperate people live. And the Vizians, the invisible people. Yes. Apparently, Kemble couldn't find anything, but Kemble was originally supposed to be called the planet Varga. They changed the name. So.
But in Mission to the Unknown, don't they suggest that the Varga plants originated on Skaro?
They did say that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that, but they're already calling it Kemble by that point too.
Yes, I see. So yeah, it could have been the planet Varga, and the Varga plants could have originated from there, and yeah,
and they just changed it. So from the scarred planet of Skaro.
I kind of like Kemble as a name because it sounds a bit sort of, mid-ranking, diplomatic, boring, bureaucratic chat of a council getting together, and because you have that element of this story where you have these, yes, albeit kind of, it's a criminal conspiracy, but it's also, not it contrasts with the supreme evil of the Daleks, that having it on a planet called Kemble, that sounds like it might be a small new town on the outskirts of London in the home counties, something like that.
Yeah.
It lends a kind of sheen of boring grey bureaucrat to it, which I find satisfying.
Let's see. A couple other things about episode 1. We could probably talk for a long time on Nicholas Courtney and his first appearance in Doctor Who, and I thought he was great. I had no problem with him as a different character. It's not entirely that different, but little younger, more action oriented. But he was great.
You could see it. There's a naturalism to his performance as the Brigadier that he's bringing the same thing to this, given that he's not necessarily expecting to be recast. I will tell you one of the things that surprised me about this story. There were a number of things that surprised me about this story, which reflect the extent to which I have avoided really finding anything out about the story before I came across it. One of those was I didn't know Nicholas Courtney was in it.
Oh,
somehow,
wow, okay.
I had completely avoided the fact that Nicholas Courtney had played any part in Doctor Who before he was the Brigadier. So,
wow, okay, that's impressive.
So I wasn't expecting that, nor did I know that Kevin Stoney had been in Doctor Who before the invasion. So again, I wasn't expecting that.
Okay. Well, let me see. So I have seen stuff from, the Dalek Master Plan. I knew Nicholas Courtney was in it. I knew he was Brett Vian. Afraid I knew he was killed by Sarah Kingdom as well. So those weren't plot points that
I
surprised
knew
me.
Jean Marsh was in it. She's sufficiently famous, and I guess also because of the status of her as a killed companion. I knew she was in it. There was one other thing that I didn't know about that I wish I had managed not to know about until I actually experienced the story, which was the monk is in it.
Oh.
I had not realized that the meddling monk appeared more than once. I thought the meddling monk was it. And it was at the point where I was looking at the cast for the whole story, not thinking I'd get any spoilers. I was like, oh, Peter Butterworth's in this one. I wonder who he's playing. Whoops.
One of the things that I had seen is a color picture of Mavic Jen, who is bright blue.
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
So my brain, and I knew there was like the Council of Monsters and that there was a lot of questions that people didn't even know what some of the monsters looked like. So I was really kind of jarred into reality when I watched the first episode, which is, of course, in black and white. And I realized that blue he may be, he's in yellow face. Or maybe he's in blackface. I'm not sure what. But Mavic Jen is supposed to be a human. He's got
yes, I thought he was supposed to be human.
Orientalish made-up eyes, and he's got long, not quite Fu Manchu length thing. And then he's got that tight cropped afro hair, and he's like, and his name's Chen. He's just like, oh my God, this is incredibly racist. I had no clue. I thought he was an alien. I always thought Mavic Jen was an alien from the fact that he's blue, but then I also realized
why was he blue? Was his skin blue?
Apparently, yes. Yeah, the picture I've seen, his skin is blue.
And is this a publicity picture, or is it a picture from the set?
I don't know.
I mean, we know that and it's one of the reasons why it doesn't work to simply, even if you can pick up color data from a black and white film, to simply colorize like that, because sets and costumes, and I guess there's no reason why this couldn't also apply to makeup, used colors that created much higher levels of contrast when filmed on black and white, because they knew people were going to watch it in black and white. So I'm wondering, because it does seem to me that he is supposed to be playing generic Asian. It is, I think you're right, it is yellow face. It's just, kind of that sort of awful 1960s racism.
Yeah. Now, I'm not finding any picture of him as blue, and I'm at the moment, but something I've seen over the years that he's still, and to your point, I remember once listening to Raymond Burr, famous for the Perry Mason TV series, talking about the realities of filming in black and white in the 1960s. And he said, it's very difficult to say, my Della, you look lovely tonight, when she's green. Right? They put green makeup on them because it looks better on black and white.
It's a very greenest comment to make.
It is. So, I don't know, but yeah, he came off so, I always thought he was an alien. And the fact that he walked in the room and started on the TV screen there, and I'm like, oh dear. I'd missed that. The first name Mavic also threw me off. Not a real name. So it's like, again, an alien. He's an alien. He's like an alien. But no, he's not. He's a human. And that's bad. That part doesn't date very well.
No.
Brett Vian's character much better than Sarah's with regards to coming around to being on the doctor's side. But I like the fact that the evidence of his eyes does convince him. He's not a stupid character, but he doesn't just fall in line. He needs the Doctor to start kind of showing him that the Doctor is useful, right? Gets the job done, kind of stuff. And so he's like, he would have been a great companion. Steven would have had a problem, I think, because I don't know that they needed two competent punch 'em up guys. But yeah, that was a.
No, I agree. I think he would have been a great companion. Sarah would have been a great companion. Brett would have been a great companion. I also, since you mentioned Stephen, I've never been that keen on him, but he's pretty good in this story. He's useful. He's intelligent. I like Peter Purves' performance here, so I'm kind of slightly reevaluating my take on Stephen now.
Well, that's good. I mean, the more we get from the equation, from the archive, we can see what they really had. It's kind of a shame to be, basing our opinion of Dodo based on the Dodo stories we have.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame now that we're going to be basing our Katarina opinion on the stories that we have now.
Well, you never know. The myth makers might be the next one to be discovered.
It might be, she might be fantastic in that. And then, whoops, go. The Alien Council is low budget. Interesting, but low budget. Okay. I can understand why that was a problem. I can imagine the customers seeing the script going, I want 12 different aliens. And you're like, really?
Yeah.
On this? Okay. It's an interesting idea. It's just, it's like, okay, let's stick some balls on this guy's face.
I mean, it reminded me a little bit, the whole thing of there being a council of aliens and the way in which they kind of adapted the aliens, which were all basically humanoid, did remind me a little bit of Babylon 5, which we have been doing for our Patreons. I feel a little more generous towards this than Babylon 5, just because its central thing is not necessarily about the kind of diplomacy going on here, but they're all somewhat unconvincing as being the kind of diplomatic representatives for entire races, or indeed being particularly kind of cunningly treacherous.
And different budget, different time, and different level of importance to the story.
Yes.
And these are bit parts mostly. Let's see. Part 3 relies a whole lot on the Daleks not being able to land a spacecraft well.
Mm-hmm.
There's really nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, there are weak points in this story in that the Daleks make mistakes or whatever. I mean, I found you describe it as being kind of Terry Nation thing, but it's sort of something that happens all the way through, which is this kind of dashing around from place to place, and these characters get introduced. These prisoner characters get introduced for what is a kind of very, very brief storyline that you think is going to launch one of them into, basically becoming another companion. At least that was my assumption, that we would have this whole hostage situation, which would, you'd get a whole episode out of that, and then it would be resolved, and then maybe they would accept him as part of the team or whatever. Instead of which, he gets ejected after about five minutes, and that's it for all of those characters. Mm-hmm. And the only way that, as indeed, some of the later elements of the story get is included, is because they're hiding there as the Daleks chase them there, and then the Daleks just miss them because as you say, Daleks are bad at landing a spaceship.
Yeah. There's another thing in this one. The Dalek Supreme basically tells the Daleks on the planet to come back and then blows them up.
Yeah.
On the way. She's like, yeah, all right, blow them up. But then later in the story, somewhere in another episode, they fail miserably, and he orders them to come back and we'll deal with you later. but the implication is he's still going to destroy them. It's like, why not just blow them up then? And just get rid of them now. You've done that before. Why do these guys get to come back and get yelled at a bit before you kill them? I get it.
I think the answer to that is that there is a need to do a certain amount of Dalek business in the episode. You know, a bit like you thinking that they want to sell some Daleks for the Christmas stockings or whatever.
But they never bring them back. Those Daleks do not come back and face the Justice. We never see that. He just says that's what's going to happen.
No. Yeah, I mean in the other case, the weakness is their lack of consistency. But it's also the case that the more that they are on screen and the more there are Dalek to Dalek conversations, the more it undermines the way in which I feel like the Daleks have been somewhat revived by being presented as this force, this invasion force who are using cunning and who are getting the various races to help them invade the solar system. It raises the stakes that they do it like that, but it's not been done carefully enough, and that is partly through those kind of scenes that you mentioned, but it's also just kind of some of the plot aspects don't really make sense. Like, it doesn't feel consistent that the Daleks would rely on the humans to mine the terranium on Uranus for 5 years.
50.
When was it 50 years? Okay, 50 years. Even more so, when their kind of previous track record had them using human slaves to mine the core out of planet Earth in Bedford in order to something or other. And so you'd have thought, well, yeah, wouldn't they have just, I don't know, done something similar to that? So I liked the fact that there was this council and there was this kind of political intrigue. I disliked the fact that there hadn't been enough kind of retooling of the Daleks as being genuinely more of a kind of menacing adult force, and that there's still a kind of playground. We've got to see them exterminating each other so often. Like with the Daleks who failed, you've got to bring them back and see them being exterminated by other Daleks rather than just disposed of in a more, I guess, a more kind of, there's almost something more chilling about doing it in a more kind of functional way of just, right, blow those guys up remotely or whatever.
I think we've already kind of talked about Katarina in episode 4 and that end for her. I would say that this is also, I believe, the episode where Chen's Space Security Service chief, who's also in on his plot, is introduced and is kind of at times acting as if maybe he's egging Chen on. And then, I don't know, do we ever see him again? I don't think so.
No, I found that disappointing. Well, I didn't find it disappointing because I'd forgotten that he was in it. But now you mention it, I am disappointed because I remember at the time thinking, oh, this is quite an interesting dynamic. And it would have been good to see where that had gone, but it obviously didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere. Yep. Part 5, this is them doing nothing except running around a room and getting stuck in essentially a teleport and beamed off to another planet.
Well, I had a stretch here, but then something happens later where I feel like I might have slightly more solid ground. But they get stuck in a room and teleported from a room that has white mice in it.
Ooh, Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah. I mean, just in the sense that we know Douglas Adams went on to become a script editor on the show, so we know that he was interested in Doctor Who. There is every possibility, I hadn't even tried to track down whether there's any kind of evidence of this, but there's every possibility that he did watch this serial and he did see them doing these experiments on the white mice. And that may have given him an idea. I don't know. It was just something about the way in which it's staged that felt a bit like there were echoes. And the thing that later on made me feel like I might be on more solid ground, feeling that Douglas Adams had watched this serial, was where you get the TARDIS materializing on a cricket pitch and the commentators commentating on it. And it is...
They are quite banal.
Yeah, it's pure comedy stuff. Like, we're very much into the Dennis Spooner chunk of the story. And it's having a writer like in the Douglas Adams, Graham Williams era of the show, where they would just do things for pure comedy value. But yeah, it's like in Life, the Universe and Everything, where Ford and Arthur appear on the pitch at Lord's out of, I think it is a sofa that has just transported them from prehistoric Earth by virtue of being an eddy in space-time. And there's some similar commentary from the commentary box. And that cannot be coincidence, surely.
Yeah. that seems pretty likely that's a riff on that. I mean, it's a great scene. Let's just use it since it's already lost, kind of thing. Let's see. This is the episode where the sister reveal didn't go well. I saw nothing. I saw nothing in any of this, whether this is 5 or into 6, to convince Sarah Kingdom that the Doctor is right.
No.
Right? She Brett Vian at least required some proof. Sarah Kingdom does not. She's just like, oh, I killed my brother and blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, fine. We're working on it. I don't like that. In this
no, I
point.
agree. And she, because of what she has done to Brett, she has more investment in disbelieving the Doctor. Like, if it's more problematic for her in emotional terms if it turns out the Doctor is right. So she is much more motivated to disbelieve him. And it feels like it should be harder work to win her over.
Yeah, I agree. Aside, in this moment, because I've been hunting while we've been talking, and I can find absolutely no actual photographic evidence that Mavic Jen is blue. I have seen fan art that he is blue. I have seen action figures people have made that are blue, and the only thing I can think of is that they've all painted him blue because they don't want to paint him yellow.
Or
like,
they say
we're not doing that.
They saw the same blue photograph that you saw, which has now vanished.
Well, I don't know if it was. Maybe I only ever saw artwork. I don't know. It's just in my mind for quite some time. I have always, when I see that character of Mavic Jen, I recall seeing him blue somewhere, but I can't find any official photos that aren't black and white, and nothing. I've seen some pictures that are claimed to be colorized, but then you can't go by that either. So let's see. Episode 6. I promise, these episodes get down to like little to nothing in my notes as we go through. So you're not less than halfway through. Episode 6. It's mostly on the spacecraft. I'm not sure. Is this a Stephen Light episode? I don't know what's going on there because Stephen doesn't talk. Did they like hire a mannequin or something and just have him standing there and pull him around on wheels or something? Because obviously they're fulfilling some sort of production thing, but even with the animations, it's hard to tell what's going on. It's just Stephen's kind of standing there frozen. Another one of these, the Daleks, we stand off. Oh, you won't kill us. I've got the Terranium, so we're going to get away, but you're going to trade, and then we're going to, which happens more than once. Part 7, that's Feast of Stephen. My notes are wow. Just no, wow. That's what's on my notes. That's it.
I mean, I love it. I love it. This is another one I would really like to be rediscovered. I was probably a bit less in love with the whole Hollywood nonsense, although it's kind of fun.
It's awfully shouty, so it's hard to tell, even with animation. It's like, what the heck's going on? Who's talking?
Yeah, it's kind of broad and shouty, and you can imagine them having a lot of fun doing it, and it would be nice to see that. So I would be interested. I would be interested in that. I in the first half of the episode with the kind of Dixon of Doc Green feel to it, I just feel like there ought to be a Doctor Who episode where they mash it up with a kind of police procedural and have the kind of really down to earth desk sergeants and all of this to kind of contrast with the wildness, the zaniness of Doctor Who, and this was a lot of fun. The kind of people emerging from the box and thinking that Sarah Kingdom was on her way to a fancy dress party and all the rest of it. I enjoyed this one. I know it has a kind of reputation because it is deliberately designed to be an episode that you could just basically drop out.
Yeah.
And you almost could. There is a cliffhanger to episode 6 that doesn't get resolved, but there is no cliffhanger to episode 7.
Yeah.
We'll say it doesn't get resolved. It gets resolved because, theoretically this is what's so unbelievably polluted. But if you dropped it out, that cliffhanger you would wonder what had happened to it. But there is no cliffhanger at the end of episode 7, at the end of the Feast of Stephen, to resolve. So yeah, it's a real curiosity, but I'd love to see it.
We should also point out, just in the case listeners don't know this, it doesn't exist. This is not a case of a missing episode. According to the records, they didn't make a copy of this, a film copy.
Oh dear.
Unless it was done and nobody left a record of it, but normally they had records and they said, this is just a Christmas, we're not going to syndicate this.
Which would make sense. Although if we get a recovered episode 6, what are they going to do to the cliffhanger then? They can't just... Ooh, that's strange.
Yeah.
But understandable and sad.
Yeah. Now, again, a lot of people are like, well, sometimes these things, paperwork doesn't go through. But as far as we know, they intentionally did not cover it. Episode 8, the meddling monk turns up for no apparent reason, except for, and the entire episode is him stopping the Doctor briefly, but completely inconsequentially, from leaving the planet before the end of the episode. Or right? It's just...
It's
I forgot.
Yes, it's weird. It's weird how easily the Doctor manages to overcome his meddling in this instance. And I wasn't even clear that was that it? It seemed strange if it was it, but it sort of sets it up as if it's a one episode rematch and then off they go.
I do appreciate that the story lays it out, whereas the TARDIS crew think they're being pursued by the Daleks, but it's really the monk. So when they find out that it's the monk, then the next time when the Daleks are pursuing them, they think it's the monk.
Yeah.
So there is a little... That part's okay. But I will point out that the monk says specifically that he jumped a time track to follow them without them being able to see him, which is what they did in the Space Museum. That was the whole thing where they leapt over.
Yeah.
Now, jumping ahead to episode 11, when Stephen and Sarah arrive to the Dalek city and it's all empty, and the sound that they're playing, the music, if you will, the incidental, I thought, this is a consequence somehow of jumping time tracks. Because it's deserted, nothing's happening, it's a mystery, there's that weird noise going on, and nothing came of that. But I really had been, in my mind, I was really sitting there going, I know what's happening here. We're repeating something that happened in the Space Museum. And
I didn't think of the Space Museum. I did think that it was some sort of temporal thing, that they had either arrived on Kemble too early or too late, because the TARDIS had not brought them where the Doctor had intended it to bring them, Possibly not in this case.
They also had the directional unit from the monk's TARDIS, who has just jumped to time track.
Which supports your theory even more. I mean, I was just thinking because the energy had flowed back into the directional unit, and they hadn't even thought that they had left Earth at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd drawn this conclusion that they were on Kemble, but there were no Varga plants, etc., etc. I had thought it was a temporal thing, and it would be atypical because I think we've probably discussed it. The fact that Doctor Who didn't really use time travel as a story device. They just used it as a way of dropping you into a time or place to tell the story until 21st century Who, it's something RTD touches on slightly and Moffat goes absolutely to town with. If they were before or after the place where they had intended to be, and the council had all been locked up in a different time period, you would definitely have had a time travel story there that was not typical of classic Who. But that is what sprung into my mind. I think your explanation makes more sense within the kind of context of classic Who, especially because, as you say, the Space Museum does something very similar, and because this story is a sequel to others in so many ways, because it has all of the Dalek stuff in it, because also it has just been shown to be a direct sequel to the Meddling Monk. So,
it feels like they were going big on stuff we've seen before and didn't. Okay, so we've got the episode Missing Part 9 in Egypt. Killing time, basically, in that particular episode. Do you know, did the Daleks change the course of history by killing all those Egyptians?
Fixed point in time? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, the one who's trying to change history should be the Meddling Monk, but he doesn't seem to be bothering with that at this point. He just seems to be intent on messing with the Doctor. It's not classic. Like, the Meddling Monk is a great serial, but it's still, I think this kind of trilogy of episodes had me very entertained by virtue of having the monk in it. It's for the reasons that you described at the beginning. The kind of overarching story has lost a little bit of the wind out of its sails, and also because the tone has shifted, that part of the story seems to become less compelling to me because it's become more sort of Dennis Spooner. But then equally, because it is Dennis Spooner and because he's bringing back his character from one of his previous serials, I was there for that. So I enjoyed it from that point of view. It definitely kept me entertained, even if it wasn't necessarily because it was part of the same kind of through line story.
And you have to give the Doctor points for a sense of style. He overcomes the monk, and then he uses his time to wrap him up like a mummy and put him in a sarcophagus just so that he can do a cliffhanger for Stephen and Sarah. I mean, there is a man with a sense of style.
It definitely is. It definitely is notable. I don't know if this is particular to this serial or whether it just struck me because you're in one serial where it's the same serial, but you've still got to have one cliffhanger after another, and it's got to be different every time. And a lot of these cliffhangers felt like, they were set up to be almost instantly resolved. This was one example of it. The mummy turns out to be the monk, which you could almost have guessed was either going to be the monk or the Doctor. But there's the episode. It is the episode prior to it. No, it's the end of this episode. It's the episode where they use the directional doohickey.
Yeah.
And they've set it up that either it is going to work or it's going to blow up the entire central column and probably kill them all. and it doesn't work, and roll credits, and then, oh no, it was just there was a fail-safe and it blew the energy back into the directional thing, and we're on Kemble after all. And it's all right, it's neat because clearly they still need the TARDIS not to be controllable, or you lose a lot of the jeopardy. But it's also just another cliffhanger that they've managed to resolve within 30 seconds.
And that is, with the chase, and I'm not a fan particularly of the chase, it's that. They keep bouncing around and they're just following their random thing, and the Daleks are chasing them. In this one, if you're going to resolve this, you've got to find a way to get back to Kemble. And I actually thought, I was hoping, because they did enough of it earlier in the story where they just left the TARDIS behind and used space travel. They could have, they could have materialized somewhere else in the Earth Federation, and they could have, or whatever, it's the solar system, and grabbed a spaceship and flew to Kemble. And they didn't need to do the, I guess they needed to have the TARDIS on. They could have, they never even, they had to have the TARDIS. They could have left the TARDIS on Kemble from episode 1 to episode 12, but then they couldn't have done the monk, which is probably why they got the TARDIS back. Probably Dennis Spooner probably needed to get the TARDIS back so that he could have the monk in it. Yep, that's probably what happened. I bet the original plan was to keep the TARDIS stuck on Kemble the whole time. That way they'd have to work their way back there to get it.
Well, there must be a lot of iterations. I don't know how much of the kind of earlier versions still exist, but there must have been a lot of iterations between. Presumably, there was a 6-episode treatment that
there must have been.
Nation would have originally had as the proposal. So yeah, but you got to. I feel like you got to give them credit for the way in which all of these things kind of have been thought through, given the complexities of the story, the multiple strands that are involved, not just within the elements that have been introduced within this story itself, but also bringing in other elements of continuity like the monk story. So it's there are some slightly contrived cliffhangers, but it's pretty solidly crafted. I've got to give them that.
Episode 11, we talked about the fact that there's nothing really happens except they're wandering around an empty set for a while, and then they find the delegates, and we got to let them go and send them home to fight the Daleks. Okay.
Did you think that was it when Jen's spaceship blew up?
No, I didn't.
Would it have been better if it was?
Yes, it would have been better if it was. But
I kind of feel like it would have been better.
He had to be killed by the Daleks. There's an absolute story imperative that he needed to be killed by the Daleks.
Yeah, I guess.
Or the Time Destructor, the Daleks. But yeah, it's like you don't cut a deal with the Daleks and come out of it alive. That that's a fundamental lesson of them. So I kind of.
Yeah, well, you've got to remember this is a children's program, and you've got to teach them that if they do a deal with the Daleks, then they'll be dead. So it
works for Japanese TV. No.
Don't play on the railway tracks, kids, and
you can repent.
Don't make a deal with the Daleks.
You will die for this. Yes. Yeah, I mean, there was the possibility. There was the slightest possibility that Chen might have turned and realized that he needed to do something to fight back against the Daleks and die doing that. Perhaps, instead of Sarah or whatever that might have been in the cards. But by taking him down the path of being so insane that he thinks he can just tell the Daleks to start obeying him because he's better than they are, yeah, he's done. and it ruins the character and really kind of messes up the him dying at the end too, because they're just putting a mad dog down at that point. And it's not even there's no regained humanity, there's no recognition of his mistake, there's no nothing. Yeah. I already said I liked him at the beginning. So we've got Sarah dying. I'm not exactly sure because I was watching this is the one with the recreation that were action figures. I'm not really sure what happened there. You may have a better idea of what I do. I kind of get the impression she turned to dust, but then I also kind of got the impression that the doctor was dying of it too, and Steven tried to turn the time destructor off, but accidentally put it into reverse. Putting it into reverse rejuvenated the doctor enough that he could get into the TARDIS, but apparently didn't reverse time enough to put the dust back on Sarah's bones. I don't know. And then the Daleks die for some reason.
Yeah,
All
I
of
mean,
that's
I'm
lost in
not
the
quite sure
animation.
what it going into reverse does, because the way in which the way in which it destroys the Dalek still sounds pretty much like it's going forward, except that the Doctor kind of looks around in the dust and finds a Dalek embryo, and I'm not quite sure how it is that Stephen is supposed to be able to switch the time destructor off, or indeed put it into reverse. But
It's only got that one button. It's a toggle switch. He thought it was on off, but it's actually forward reverse. It's written in Dalek.
But is it why? I mean, if you could switch it off, why didn't the Doctor already switch it off? That was the thing that I didn't understand. I had assumed it had gone into some sort of like critical meltdown. Once you'd activated it, it would keep going until the Terranium was spent, and I thought that was part of the goal here.
It was, but okay. I think he didn't tell that to Stephen. I think he told that to Sarah after she came back. So Stephen doesn't know what's happening. He just sees the Doctor with the time destructor.
Surprising to me that the thing has a switch, because
Daleks don't use switches too, probably.
No, because the Doctor could have, if that was the plan, but that was basically killing the Doctor and Sarah, then he could have changed the switch. I also think that the other factor in this is that what the Doctor was trying to do was to get it to the TARDIS, that somehow he could contain it within the TARDIS or contain its effect within the TARDIS. And that, as far as I could tell from what we were being told in the narration on the audio, that it was once the Doctor had got inside the TARDIS that he recovered, and therefore it wasn't necessarily the effect of the time destructor having been put in reverse.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. My impression, and again, based on not the worst of the animations, but pretty bad, and the reading of what I heard without benefit of narration, is that I think he was just trying to get to the TARDIS and keep the time destructor away from the Daleks long enough, but I think he was trying to get into the TARDIS because it was safe in there. I don't know if he was going to leave the time destructor outside or not. If it can't be turned off, it doesn't do any good if the Daleks find it, right?
That's true, but it's got a switch on it, so can it be turned off?
But they've got suckers, not fingers. So yeah,
I feel like this is one of those instances where we could do with the novelization.
And what the heck is the point of the time destructor anyway? They spent 50 years mining something. First off, there is no way that you could spend 50 years mining, even 5 years, but I'm sure it was 50, the most rare, valuable substance in the universe, and that somebody doesn't, I don't know, use it? I mean, what's the point of having it? I'm going to collect this for my children. No. It's like, you must be mining it for a reason, and there's just no way Mavic Jen's been working on that for 50 years, that the Daleks has been working on it for 50 years. But if that's the only thing in the universe and the only place in the universe you can get it, and the Daleks make the time destructor, that is a one-time use weapon. What were they going to do? Was it to destroy Earth? I mean, okay, we got one down. There you go.
Yeah, well, it does seem to be a planet killer, which is obviously a very kind of potent weapon, but it doesn't quite match up to what I was expecting. When they describe it as being the time destructor, I wasn't expecting it to be something that would destroy a planet using time.
Me neither.
I thought it was going to destroy time itself. That it was going to be kind of like, oh, this is a device that can basically wipe out last week, or that, the kind of more. And I guess this is partly because of all of the kind of temporal shenanigans that we have encountered, within
Since
all of the
war.
mythology of the Time War. Yeah, all these kind of temporal weapons or whatever, the kinds of things you hear about in the Gallifrey Big Finish spin-off series, or indeed the John Hurt audios. But it didn't feel like, I agree, it didn't feel like this was quite a big enough weapon given the effort that had gone into it. And also, I was up to this point kind of thinking like, oh, actually, if they had these kind of very incredible temporal, we've already got it established that basically, I think it's explicitly said within this serial, we've seen the Daleks using time travel in the Chase. In this serial, they say only the Daleks have time travel, apart from this time traveler or these two time travelers who are the only Gallifreyans that we have seen in the show up to this point. So you are setting up this thing where there are the two races that have time travel. You're then saying there is this time destructor, which I thought was a temporal weapon, which is like, 3 years into Doctor Who, you are already setting up the Time War. And we already know from what RTD has said that Genesis of the Daleks is the first blow struck in the Time War proper, but it all feels like it actually is a bit of clever pulling together. But the Time Destructor isn't quite that. I still think a lot of that is there, but the Time Destructor is clearly not quite that.
Yeah, and I do think that it's been a long time since I've listened to the John Hurt ones or any of the Time War stuff that Big Finish has done. But I think they are also of the opinion that the Time Destructor destroys time, not destroys using time. But that's clearly not what's happening here. This is a weapon to use time
clearly.
to destroy things. But
as far as I could tell from what I could hear.
Yeah. All right. Have we got anything else? I mean, apart from the obvious, isn't it great that we've got these back? Isn't it amazing that Film is Fabulous is out there working and they are paying off what they said that they were going to pay off? And I guess this is the moment to say they are a registered charity and you can donate to them if you want to help with their work, which I kind of recommend if you have the money to spare. I mean, you could send it to me. I mean, that would be fine too. But I'm going to say
you'll promise you'll go and look for some missing Doctor Who episodes if people do.
I've already contributed to Film is Fabulous, actually. So not just because they got these back, but because I mean, you're expecting them to get some Avengers episodes back, right?
Oh wow! I mean that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
So, and if you haven't seen them, there's some videos online like how they were processing the video. Oh, I should say this. Looks great. The new ones look great. The ones that were already on the iPlayer, they could have maybe shuttled them over to Film is Fabulous and say, "Hey guys, while you're doing it, I mean, could you?"
Well, it wasn't. Oddly enough, it was Film is Fabulous. I think did some kind of deal or asked the BBC to do some kind of deal to get them restored, the 2 episodes that they discovered. And it wasn't the normal Doctor Who restoration team who did that restoration. But the other episodes, they haven't had the attention of the Doctor Who restoration team because they haven't been released as part of the collection or anything yet. So there's still work to be done there. But obviously, we are expecting season 3 to come out at some point, hopefully. So we will get better versions.
I guess I can accept that. It just seems like it was so fast from the time that they announced that they had found them to the point where they were released. And looking at what they showed on the videos about how they take the film, put leader on it, and run it through the scanner, and it feels like they did that restoration. The level of restoration work they've done here feels like it was done in a week. That it's like this was not, oh gosh, we just can't afford because it's going to take us months. Like this feels like they ran it through a restoration machine and here you go. Nice 2K copy. Have fun. We punched it up with VidFire or whatever it was and looked great. Have fun. Which makes me think they could have just popped the other 3 episodes in while they were in the process. It's like, it's at least to make all of them on the iPlayer look the same. But that's just me griping. Look, anyway, do you have anything else on this?
No, I think I've covered all my points.
This has been brutally long, but then Dalek Master Plan is a bit on the long side. So
it's the longest serial. It's the same length as Flux, but obviously number of episodes.
Much better.
The longest.
I will go this. It's much, much better than Flux. There we go. I'm taking a stand. All right. Well, looking forward to the next batch of found episodes that they get back. And
absolutely. Let it not be another 13 years, please. God, of missing Doctor Who episodes.
Yeah. I mean, their description of the state of film collecting, or more specifically, film collectors, is really very kind of depressing because the people who have this hobby are old men. And the problem is that they're dying and their collections are being dealt with sometimes in ways of like throw them in the garbage. Nobody wants them in the family.
Which is very worrying. And there is, I'm always skeptical about this. The kind of hints that Film is Fabulous gave, months back, whenever it was, everyone was like, oh my God, they've found at least 6 serials and lots of rumors about how much they had. And I'm not knocking it. I mean, 2 episodes of the Dalek Master Plan is great.
Yep.
But I have also, from reading around some of this stuff, I have also felt slightly more convinced. And again, I don't believe it. I don't believe that anything exists until there is proof it exists and it's back. But I have felt slightly more convinced by some of the stories around some of the more sought after episodes. And the Web of Fear Part 3 is one that I think we've discussed before. People want that because it's the Brigadier's first episode, and it was rumoured to have been found with the other Web of Fear episodes.
Yeah.
I think episode 4 of the Dalek's Master Plan falls into this, that it is particularly sought after. And that the problem with this is that incentivizes these kind of private collectors, that the value is so much higher. And so they stay in these private collections. And like you say, the risk is then, because they are secreted away, that they could be not looked after, that, when people die, it could be ignored, the value of what they've got or whatever. And I just want to say, just for goodness sake, before it's too late, get copies made, run it through this process so that the
just
actual
give it to
material
Film
is not lost.
Give it to Film is Fabulous.
No, exactly.
You can't take it with you, and your kids don't want it. And
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
that is absolutely it. And I'm slightly more inclined to believe that that a couple of those, and there's another episode, I forget which one, that has been mentioned, that there is credible evidence that these things are around. So it almost makes it more frustrating to think that might be the case.
One of the things that I did find interesting is that, I guess, I'm taking it from the word from interviews I've heard with the folks at Film is Fabulous, that if you were working at the BBC and you were there and you found, for example, these 2 cutting copies, as they are apparently labeled, and they were going to be chucked out, and you said, yeah, I'll just take that. I'm a film collector. I'll take those and put them in my collection. That's a crime. That's theft. Even if they were to be destroyed, that's a theft. These are BBC employees with pensions. which would be threatened by revealing that they stole property from the BBC.
Except there have been amnesties.
Right. There have been amnesties, and the BBC has never prosecuted anybody, but would you risk your pension on it? That for whatever reason, they just thought, I never liked Bob anyway. And now it turns out he stole stuff. I mean, presumably anybody that was superior to them and didn't like them is probably dead too. But, I can kind of, certainly in prior years, they're getting up, the closer you get to dead, the less likely that's a problem. But then on the other hand, I still wouldn't want to lose my pension, no matter how old I was. In fact, the older I am, the less likely I'd want to lose my pension. It's just, maybe what we need here is not the BBC leading by, we haven't prosecuted anybody yet, to actually the BBC coming out and putting it in writing. It said, we aren't going to prosecute you. Return it. We aren't going to dock your pension. We won't do that. But I don't think they ever have, to my knowledge. They just have been very understanding and not done anything about it. So, anyhow. All right. We really are done this time. Simon, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, as always.
Listeners, I hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol. This has been Fusion Patrol. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, we hope you'll consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com/fusionpatrol or patreon.com/fusionpatrol. For our Patreon subscribers, we're currently running a special series on Babylon 5. Come join the conversation and find other content at fusionpatrol.com. You can contact us on social media, where our Fediverse address is @podcast@fusionpatrol.com or by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. Fight the Future by Amberwolf is our theme music. You can find more from Amberwolf at bandcamp.com. This has been a Lone Locust production.